Welcome to our deep dive today. We've got something pretty unique to explore this time.
Yeah.
A memoir by an angel named Joe,
Wow.
who's looking back on events from the Bible,
Okay.
from the Garden of Eden all the way to the crucifixion of Jesus,
Interesting.
and even giving us a peek into what looks like the end of the world.
So where does he even begin?
Well, it's interesting how he starts his story, actually.
Yeah.
Joe describes witnessing the judgment at the Great White Throne
Huh?
from an angel's perspective outside of time, as we understand it.
Outside of time.
Yeah, he sees all of human history just laid out before him
Oh, wow.
and describes the judging of souls across millennia.
And that's happening.
It's happening in what feels like seconds to him.
I can't even imagine witnessing something like that.
It's a powerful image.
Yeah, it really makes you think about.
It really makes you think about the vastness of time and that idea of eternal judgment.
Right. What's also fascinating is how Joe emphasizes that even angels have emotions.
Oh, really?
You know, witnessing this judgment, even from his unique vantage point,
Yeah.
it evokes a profound sense of awe in him and reminds him of the immense sacrifice made for humanity.
So it makes you wonder if an angel is moved by these events, how much more should we be as humans who are directly affected by them?
That's a great point. It really highlights the weight and significance of these biblical events, even from a cosmic perspective.
Okay, so let's dive into some specific stories.
Okay.
Joe takes us to the Garden of Gethsemane on the night before the crucifixion.
Okay.
And he paints a really vivid picture of Jesus's agonizing prayer. And he describes it as so intense that it literally caused him to sweat blood.
Wow. You know, I've heard that before, but to hear it from that perspective...
It just gives it a whole other weight.
Absolutely.
Now, Joe and the other angels were ready to intervene. But Jesus, knowing they were there, told them to stand down.
So he knew they were there.
Yeah, and it really adds a new dimension to the story. Knowing that even angels were on standby, awestruck by Jesus's commitment to his mission.
It's like seeing behind the curtain of this pivotal moment in history.
Right.
Imagine the tension.
Yeah.
The angels wanting to protect Jesus.
Right.
And Jesus choosing to follow his divinely appointed path.
It definitely makes you rethink the traditional telling of the Gethsemane story, knowing that powerful angels were ready to act. Just adds another layer to Jesus's choice and the weight of what he was about to endure.
Right. It wasn't just a human drama playing out. It was a cosmic event with implications for all of creation.
So next we get to the trial and crucifixion.
Right.
And Joe draws this striking parallel between the inspection of the Passover lamb and Jesus being presented before the authorities.
I'm listening.
He describes it as if Jesus was the ultimate sacrificial lamb, being judged and found worthy for a purpose far beyond human comprehension.
Wow.
And Joe's account of the crucifixion itself is incredibly vivid and detailed. He talks about the sounds of the hammer, the blood soaking the ground, the darkness that fell over the land. It's a really visceral and moving account.
What's interesting here is that Joe's angelic perspective allows him to, tap into the emotional states of everyone present.
Oh, wow.
Both the humans and the unseen demonic forces working around.
I don't even think about that.
Yeah.
He even mentions a Roman soldier named Claudius, who seems especially impacted by what he's witnessing.
That's a great detail. It really humanizes the story.
I know.
You have this Roman soldier, likely a hardened veteran, who finds himself deeply affected by the events of the crucifixion.
It makes you wonder what was going through his mind, what he saw or felt that made such a profound impact on him.
It speaks to the idea that these events were so momentous, that they transcended cultural and religious boundaries, touching the hearts of even those who didn't fully understand their significance.
Next, Joe takes us back to the story of Noah's Ark. And he draws a powerful parallel between that ancient event and the crucifixion. He describes a world that had forgotten God, obsessed with pleasure and ignoring warnings, and then judgment arrived in the form of the flood.
Right. It reminds me of, that cyclical nature of history, that we see.
Joe's description of the flood is far more detailed
Really?
and dramatic than typical retellings.
Yeah.
He talks about the sudden appearance of puddles that quickly grow into raging torrents.
Oh, wow.
The desperate attempts to escape the rising waters. The animals gathering at the ark.
Wow. It sounds like he's really transporting you back in time.
Yeah.
Making you feel the terror and chaos of that event.
This vivid retelling of the flood really makes you think about that cyclical nature of history.
Yeah.
You know, Joe seems to be suggesting that humanity has a tendency to repeat its mistakes.
Right.
To forget the lessons of the past and fall back into old patterns of behavior.
It makes you wonder
You really do.
if we're ignoring warnings in our own time.
Yeah.
Heading towards our own version of a flood.
Yeah. What are the consequences of our actions individually and collectively?
That's a profound insight.
Now let's talk about the darkness
Okay.
that falls at noon during the crucifixion. It's described as this cosmic event.
Yeah, not just a simple eclipse.
You're right. Not just a simple eclipse.
Right.
Joe connects it to God's inability to look upon sin, emphasizing the profound weight of what Jesus was taking on in that moment.
Right.
He then draws a fascinating parallel to another Old Testament story, the Assyrian siege of Jerusalem.
Okay.
He describes this really powerful Assyrian king leading a vast army against God's people. But God sends an angel who wipes out 185,000 Assyrian soldiers in a single night.
Wow. So it's interesting how he juxtaposes these two stories.
I know.
On the one hand, you have God's power to destroy, to bring swift judgment.
Right.
On the other hand, you have God's willingness to sacrifice, to absorb the weight of sin himself through Jesus.
It makes you think about the complexities of God's nature, that balance between justice and mercy.
Right. What makes him choose one path over the other?
And how does that relate to our understanding of free will and divine intervention?
That's a really thought-provoking question.
Yeah. And one that Joe's memoir encourages us to grapple with.
You know, it seems that he's urging us to go beyond simply reading these stories as historical events.
Right.
He wants us to engage with them on a deeper level.
Yeah.
Wrestle with their meaning and to consider their implications for our own lives.
I think that's a great way to approach this memoir. It's not just a retelling of familiar stories.
Right.
It's an invitation to think critically, to ask difficult questions, and to search for deeper truth.
Absolutely. You know, it's remarkable how Joe manages to connect these events from centuries ago to our lives today.
I know, it's amazing.
And he doesn't shy away from those tough questions.
Right.
We all have, like, why would a loving God allow suffering?
Right. He tackles that head on, suggesting that even in the darkest times, there's a purpose, a plan unfolding that we might not grasp in the moment.
You know, he brings up God turning away from sin during the crucifixion.
Yeah.
It wasn't out of abandonment, Joe says,
Right.
but a necessary consequence of God's holiness.
That's a concept that's always fascinated me.
Yeah.
It speaks to the idea that God is so pure, so perfect, that sin is like a repellent to him. It can't exist in his presence.
Exactly. And that helps us understand the magnitude of what Jesus did on the cross. He took on the weight of all that sin, all that separation from God so that we could be reconciled.
Another thing Joe explores is the interplay between our choices and God's involvement in our lives.
Right. It's not a
simple cause and effect.
Right. It's not a simple cause and effect situation.
No. And he uses the story of Noah's Ark
to illustrate this point. Joe reminds us that the flood wasn't a random act of God.
Right.
It was a consequence of humanity's persistent disobedience and rejection of his warnings.
So we have free will, but our choices have consequences, both for ourselves and for the world around us.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it?
Right.
Joe also emphasizes God's incredible capacity for forgiveness and the power of repentance.
He brings up the story of the thief on the cross next to Jesus. Even in his final moments, the thief recognizes Jesus as the Messiah and asks for mercy.
And what's amazing is that Jesus grants him salvation. promising him a place in paradise.
It's a beautiful moment of grace in the midst of this horrific scene.
It shows us that it's never too late to turn back to God, that even in the face of death, there's hope for redemption.
So let's talk about the resurrection itself.
Okay.
Joe's description is awe-inspiring. He talks about brilliant light, an earthquake, the Roman guards fainting from sheer terror.
Wow.
It's like the whole universe is responding to this incredible event.
Powerful image of victory over death, the ultimate triumph of good over evil.
And the way Joe describes Jesus appearing to the disciples after the resurrection is so moving. He captures their initial shock, the disbelief, and then that gradual dawning of understanding and the immense joy that follows.
It's a reminder that faith isn't always a straight line.
No.
It's often a journey full of twists and turns, doubt and certainty.
And Joe suggests that angels might be guiding us on our journeys, helping us see the signs, hear the whispers of truth in our lives.
I love that idea.
It is a really beautiful idea.
It's as though we have these unseen companions walking alongside us, pointing us toward the divine.
Joe's writing is so effective.
Yeah. Because he doesn't just present these stories as ancient history. He connects them to our own experiences, our struggles, our hope.
He invites us to consider the possibility that we're all part of this grand narrative. This cosmic drama that's still unfolding.
It is. It's a little overwhelming to think about.
It is.
But also incredibly exciting.
Absolutely.
You know, it's a call to live our lives with intention, knowing that we're not just random specks in the universe.
No.
We're part of something much bigger. Something with eternal significance.
You know, we've covered a lot of ground. From the Garden of Eden to the resurrection and beyond.
So what would you say is the most important takeaway from Joe's memoir so far?
For me, it's that persistent message of hope, even in the darkest of times, no matter what we've done, no matter how far we've strayed.
God's love is always there. We just have to open ourselves to it.
That's beautifully said.
Oh, thanks.
And it reminds me of how Joe ends this section of his memoir.
Okay.
He challenges us to consider our place in the grand scheme of things, and even suggests that perhaps an angel helped us focus on reading his very words. Wow.
It's a powerful idea, isn't it?
It is.
The notion that we might be guided and supported in ways we don't even realize.
It makes you wonder what other subtle influences might be at work in our lives.
Exactly. It opens up a whole new way of looking at the world around us, seeing the potential for the divine in every moment.